This Honourable House is now in session. I am not yet in receipt of the minutes of this Honourable Chamber held on the 17th of July, 2018.
The 17th of July be deferred until they are available.
Question is that the minutes of this Honourable Chamber held on the 17th day of July 2018 be deferred. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The minutes of this Honourable Chamber held on the 17th of July 2018 are now deferred.
Announcements by Your Honour the Speaker. Messages from His Excellency, Her Excellency the Governor General. Petitions, papers.
Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the Police Complaints Authority Annual Report of 2017 and the ministerial statement on the resumption of payment of tuition fees by the Government of Barbados for Barbadian undergraduate students at the University of the West Indies.
Government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills. Two bills. We read the first thing. The report and the fiscal incentive.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Airport Service Charge Amendment Bill of 2018 and the Fiscal Incentives Repeal Bill of 2018.
Question is that the aforementioned bills be read for the first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers. You actually read it. The statement is actually read. Huh? What are you going to do? Move right there. Mr. Speaker, we will revert to ministerial statements later in the day. Oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day. Suspension.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that standing orders number 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Question is that the aforementioned bills standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are so suspended.
Private members' business, sir. Order number 1. In the name of the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, to move the passing of a resolution to take note of the thrown speech of Her Excellency the Governor General and the determination of the government to implement the provisions referred to therein.
The Honourable Member for Christchurch South.
I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know whether it is common to do this, nor even traditional, but I beg to take note of my attraction, my particular attraction to this morning's prayer from Psalm 121, which is familiar to all of us within the Christian tradition and reminds us of where ultimate power lies and remind us of our own humility. And those opening lines struck me as being quite significant, always in this place. And I'm grateful to the chaplain for uttering those words today. As to the more immediate business, I believe, Mr. Speaker, I was the member who moved the resolution on June the 5th, expressing gratitude to Her Excellency for that intervention in outlining the government's policies. And it therefore falls upon me today to speak to the content of what we know as the throne speech, and to promise the people of Barbados that there should be no departure, and that if there's to be any departure, it will only be in extreme circumstances where it cannot otherwise be avoided. You will note, Your Honor, that that throne speech was consistent with the manifesto of the Barbados Labour Party during the last election, so that if there is any good statement of faith or any statement of good faith, it resides in the fact that the government, even before it became the government, was articulating policy in direct contact with the people of Barbados during an election campaign. What it articulated during that campaign transfigured itself into a manifesto document, a written document. That document largely, and perhaps in more abridged form, well, definitely in more abridged form, transfigured itself into the throne speech. And you're well aware, Mr. Speaker, of the business that has transpired since we first sat on that day, that legislation has come to this chamber in keeping with the manifesto, in keeping with the content of the throne speech. And that legislation has been an act of good faith with all that was promised to the people of Barbados prior to our entry into this chamber. My role, therefore, as I understand it, Mr. Speaker, is to reflect on the content of that throne speech and on the promises made therein, and perhaps, if I may, to give some justification or some basis for the articulation of the policy mentioned in the speech of Her Excellency. I make the personal confession that it has been new language visiting me. I don't know everything. And over the last year, the term mission critical became a new term within my own vocabulary. It is not something that I was familiar with. It probably is attractive to the public to have that term introduced into the national vocabulary, mission critical. And we all now know what it means, that it speaks to a priority of undertakings which the government will pursue. I don't interpret my role here today to be that of excoriating the last government, not even unmasking the last government. Perhaps, and only perhaps, there will be occasional reference to the last government and to the last government's policies and initiatives and practices. But that will be done only for the purpose of indicating or making ourselves aware as to where we are and why we are here, why we are at this point. And therefore, it is with that sense of the past, of the not-too-distant past that we have had to come to this place and to say to you, Mr. Speaker, and to say to the people of Barbados, why some initiatives must be described as mission critical, why they must be given highest priority within the government's program, within the government's agenda. Everyone in Barbados is aware that over the last 2 years, prior to the last election, the economy of Barbados had sunk into great national despair. We were all aware of a rising national debt. And to be fair and to be truthful, not for the first time has the national debt been an issue in Barbados. Not for the first time. So that was nothing new. Not for the first time was the issue of the foreign reserves an issue in Barbados. What was probably different on this occasion was that it seemed that everyone in Barbados knew, from laypersons back to economists, back to high-ranking government officials, the vendors on the streets, everybody in Barbados seemed to be aware of the crisis into which Barbados had fallen. And everybody who had ears was prepared to listen to the voices of wisdom. Except, of course, the government of the day. There was this rampage of money printing to pay salaries. I wouldn't go into it in any detail, but we are all aware that's government's deliberate policy. It was the government of the day, it was government's deliberate policy of avoiding contact with good economic policy that plunged this country into economic disaster. And so, while the issue of the national debt was not new, while the issue of the scarcity of foreign reserves was not new, what appeared new to Barbados was that government's unwillingness to make contact with rational decision-making in its financial, fiscal, and economic policy. And therefore, the issue of the national debt and the issue of the falling foreign reserves has been correctly described by the Prime Minister as a mission-critical issue, something that must be confronted from the first day of taking office. I said on the last occasion I had the pleasure and the privilege of being here that I don't believe in political honeymoons, and that is still my position. And I'm pleased that I am speaking with a government that has avoided any triumphalism, any celebration of a 5-year people's intervention. I am pleased that I am associated with a government that has sat down to the serious work of the people's business in a context of severe crisis which has visited this country by governments, the past government's deliberate policy over the last 10 years. And therefore, you are aware, Mr. Speaker, that this government has had to undertake policies to address the issue of a large national debt and to address the issue, the potentially, not potentially, the calamitous and disastrous prospect for this country if we do not address the issue of foreign reserves. Every man in Barbados now knows, by a series of involving himself in political debate, that we buy what we buy from overseas with foreign currencies, and largely and mainly US currencies. And when those currencies begin to disappear from within our system, our banking system, that we are all in peril of quite literal starvation. And that is why the business of government, and that is why the business of governing people, and that is why the business of involving oneself in public finance is very serious business. You cannot run around the country employing the people, employing at the expense of government, every man jack that shows his face at a government office. You simply cannot do that. That is the reality in Barbadian public life and the reality of Barbadian politics, that you cannot pursue unwise policies at the expense of the country and have that culminate in a central bank printing money against the advice, against the wise counsel of all of the economists in Barbados. That is the policy they pursued, and that is the policy they pursued for narrow political advantage, except that the country fell into grave peril, so that the very people they were trying to protect were in peril as a result of unwise policies. Allied to that, of course, was the issue of the exchange rate. And I know that I am speaking to a country which is now all too well familiar with these issues, mission-critical issues. But that familiarity with the issue, thank you so much, that familiarity with the issue does not solve the problem. What solves the problem is government's intervention. A government that is honest, a government that takes the step of resolving these issues, and a government that is honest enough to tell the people of this country these are mission-critical issues and that they must be confronted with some matter of urgency. And so, you are aware, Your Honor, that the government has taken steps to deal with the national debt, the issue of the national debt, the falling foreign reserves, and that fixed exchange rate. And the people of Barbados know and understand that government cannot go partying or engaging in revelrous conduct at the expense of the country, and that government must be wise and strict in its economic and fiscal policy, except, Your Honor, that this government has at the same time sought to alleviate the dire situation that people have experienced. And that dire situation is manifested in the cost of living. I am no economist, but the nature of life, the nature of economic life, is that prices go up. All over the world and in every society, prices increase. It seems to be a natural incidence of commercial life, or it seems to be a natural incidence of economic life. The larger an economy grows, it seems that prices accompany that phenomenon. Except that there are occasions on which government can manage the, beg your pardon, it seems that there are occasions on which government can manage the increase in prices. And this government has been good enough to abolish a tax which was stifling economic growth, and it was a tax that was suppressing the ability of people to spend, not again for revelry, but spend for survival. And therefore, the removal of that tax was greeted by the business community with the announcement on their part that prices would drop. And again, here has been a government keeping its promise to the people of Barbados that it would take initiatives to reduce the cost of living in Barbados. And we are all happy that the government has been able, with its wise advice, to abolish that so-called NSRL. The government has given further undertakings to reduce VAT. Many years ago, when this country was better run than it had been run over the last 10 years, the VAT was introduced and it was at 15%. I need not give a history of this. But as usual, Barbadians complained about the level of VAT, and they got accustomed to it. And the government's coffers became close to full. And the economy was doing well. And the government of the day, of the last 10 years, increased that tax with the promise, and we all know this story, with the promise that it was a temporary expedient and that it would be reduced. They've never reduced it. They failed. That was another one of their broken promises. This government, Mr. Speaker, has made a solemn promise to reduce the VAT back to 15%, and I have no doubt that it is something that will be achieved in the fullness of time. The letters IMF are letters that are met in this country and in all developing countries with sadness on the part of populations. But it is one of the realities of modern life. It is one of the realities of life in developing countries, that you will need help from time to time. It reflects the domestic situation. When I say domestic, I mean home. It reflects the situation in people's homes, that from time to time you will need help, whether it is a credit union, a bank, or a good friend, you will need help. And this government has come to the people of Barbados, and it has spoken to the people of Barbados honestly. Now, the evidence of that honesty is this: not many parties are prepared, or hardly ever are prepared, to tell the people of Barbados that they're going to enter into an IMF program before the election date. That is the evidence of good honesty, that this party came to the people of Barbados prior to an election day. It is the language that normally reverses the fortune of the person who makes that undertaking to go to the IMF. Not many parties have won an election after promising the people, or after undertaking that they will go to the IMF. But the people of this country have kept such confidence with this party that in spite of that undertaking to visit the IMF, the people of Barbados said, we shall keep confidence with you, that when you assume office, that you can go to the IMF, except that the people of this country have also said to this government that we have confidence in this government to negotiate with the IMF, and not to negotiate hard, but to negotiate in the interests, not in the interest of numbers, not in the interest of econometrics, but in the interest of the human capital that is ultimately the most important factor in any negotiation with the IMF. It is always the human capital. My position on that, Mr. Speaker, perhaps it is personal. Perhaps I am not speaking now for the party. But my position is that in any negotiation, the human factor takes priority. You're not lending money to buildings, nor roads, nor streetlights. You're lending money to people. And therefore, I have taken the position in here before, and Mr. Speaker, allow me to take it again. Perhaps this is a very personal perspective, but I invite the government, the cabinet, to incline its ear not to my wisdom, but to the wisdom of millions of people all over the world, that any negotiation with the International Monetary Fund must put the interests of people first, the human capital, and this is not new language. This is the language spoken in parliaments all over the world. So there's no personal credit to be taken for something that has been said for years and years, as long as there has been the existence of less developed countries, as long as there has been the existence of developing countries, and certainly as long as there has been the existence of the International Monetary Fund. That leads me, Mr. Speaker, to say this, that this country rests perhaps on a number of foundations, I know that one of them is education. I know this country, as constituted at present, would be a far and clean different place if our parents and if our grandparents and perhaps our great-grandparents did not invest in the institution of education. This would be a clean different place. All of us in this chamber have visited the other islands in the Caribbean, all of us, over the last 30, 40 years. And we could see the differences. And this is not to put down my brothers and sisters in the other islands, but it arose out of social, political, and economic policy that Barbados took the lead, Barbados took the initiative in making heavy investment in education. And without oil, without bauxite, without gold, we held our heads high with the other countries in the Caribbean that had those resources. Mr. Speaker, our resource was the human resource, was human capital. And we invested in that capital. And we invested in that capital through the institution of education. Education has brought us here. And it remains one of the foundations upon which this modern Barbados stands. And I say in here today that any negotiation with any foreign bank must respect that foundation upon which this great little country was built. I want you to permit me, Mr. Speaker, to add this as well, that if we are going to be speaking of the great foundations upon which this country rests, trade unionism must be one of those foundations. Anybody who knows the history of modern Barbados, and the history of modern Barbados, I would date back to the early 20th century, that it is the emergence of trade unionism which promoted democracy, along with education, which promoted democracy more than most other institutions in this country. And in any forward march, in any negotiation that we make with any foreign entity, the institution of education must be respected. And the voice of trade unionism must be respected as well. That is why one must be particularly troubled at the government arrears to UCAL, for example, which was a corporation owned by the trade union in this country, the oldest trade union. And one must also unequally be concerned that government had built up arrears to the University of the West Indies, one of the shining lights within the larger institution of education in Barbados. And I have identified two of the many foundations upon which this modern society rests: education, trade unionism. This government is now faced with a situation of redressing debts and addressing debts owed to those two members of those two institutions, education and trade unionism. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are at the point where these issues known as mission-critical issues in many ways are depriving us of that sojourn that politicians like to enjoy upon early accession to office, that honeymoon. We will have no honeymoon. We want no honeymoon. We want to engage in the serious business of placing this country back to where we knew it used to belong as a leader in the Caribbean. There were the other mission-critical issues. It perhaps was not anticipated as one of the issues that a year ago or 2 years ago, nobody anticipated that the South Coast would have become what it became. I looked around to see if the member for Christchurch East was present. but he deserves much credit. Much credit. It seems that the last year and a half prior to the election, that the situation on the South Coast reflected what government in this country had become. It seemed that way. And he, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, has taken that task unto himself to resolve the issue. And to speak honestly to the people of Barbados, I will say this, the problem has disappeared from the streets of Barbados.
The Honourable Member has 5 more minutes.
I'm obliged to you, sir. How many? 5? Oh, 5. Okay. No, that's all right. You heard the speaker? Thank you, sir. Yes, I want to congratulate the Honourable Member for Christchurch East in the few minutes I have left for having brought partial resolution to the situation on the South Coast. If this government is to maintain its reputation for honesty in office, it must always tell the truth. And I believe the truth today is that the problem on the South Coast has not been solved. It has disappeared from the streets, but it is being worked upon. So those persons who traverse Highway 7 and reach their homes happily with the awareness that the sewage has disappeared from the streets must not rest without the knowledge that the problem is still existing, but that it is being worked upon. The Honourable Member for Christchurch East has himself indicated to me a date at which it is likely to be resolved, but that is not for me to disclose. What is for me to disclose is the gratitude of the people of Barbados that it clearly is a fact that this government is working on the issue and is working on that issue quite assiduously in the interest of Barbadians. In my short time left, Mr. Speaker.
Very short, that is correct.
Beg your pardon, sir?
Yes, you're right, it's short time left.
Yes, short time left. I had planned to address you on the issue of violence that afflicts this society. I had planned to address you, and I could not address the issue of violence unless I had said something about the system of justice, which you know about better than all the people in this chamber. But it must trouble you. You're a speaker here today, sir. I don't see you in any other hat. You're a speaker here today. But it must trouble you, Mr. Speaker, that you have lived in a country which put the system of justice on pause for months. That is a responsible government. And that the people of Barbados who do not visit the courts which were reopened last week must know that the accommodation in warrens is inadequate, it is not fit. A lady should not lift her baby and stand in the sun for an hour and a half while waiting for a birth certificate. The people of Barbados have to know this. They have to know that the last government plunged us into a situation in which the people of Barbados had no access to justice. The people of Barbados must know that their constitutional right of access to justice was denied by the last government when it closed the courts of this country. And that is something that our Attorney General has had to deal with. I consider that a mission critical issue as well. But I want the people of Barbados to understand that never again must the courts be closed.
The Honourable Member wind up, please.
Thank you very much, sir. And so, in the winding up, I don't know how many sentences constitute a winding up.
It's not the sentences, Honourable Member, it's the time.
It's the time, right?
That's correct.
Well, I will devise a long sentence with some commas and say to you
Be
that,
careful, Honourable Member.
Yes, I'm winding up, sir. That on the issue of the regional effort, that we have to continue to support our regional airlines. That if we do not support our regional airlines, regionalism will die, because regionalism rests largely on trade. And if, in my winding up, we have to continue to protect LIAC and the other regional airlines. And in my last sentence is this, after that comma, is that I wish to congratulate the government.
Honourable Member, your time has expired.
I am obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I was giving the Leader of the Opposition a chance at first reply. I thought that he was going to jump to his feet and give us his impressions of the throne speech. But I saw that he did not take the opportunity. I guess he's waiting for me to give my presentation to then fashion his presentation off of mine. And I would understand that, as the honourable member has been known to do that in the past, and I will now give him the opportunity to do that again in the future. But as I hope to start as many speeches as I can with a passage from the Bible, I pondered over it most of last night and part of this morning to find the most apt passage that I could think of. And I looked through several commentaries of several passages to find one that would best fit this particular occasion as we respond and take note of the throne speech given by Her Excellency at the beginning of this sitting. And the one I came up with comes from Jonah chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. And I know that the honourable member for St. Michael West would appreciate this particular passage. And it goes, "Now the word of the Lord came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness is come up before me." Now, Mr. Speaker, the reason I thought that this passage was apt, because it brought to mind the previous administration and the unfortunate directions and way that they not only treated this country, but the direction that they took this country down. And Mr. Speaker, as I work not only in the ministry, but as I listen to all of the various things that went on in all of the various ministries throughout Barbados, as we hear of all of the contracts that were given out, as we hear of contracts that were renewed 2 years in advance of them coming to an end, contracts for people who were being paid even more than the Prime Minister of this country, as we hear of contracts given out to restaurants for 10 years and 12 years and all these sorts of things, you know, it brings to mind the wickedness, like the wickedness that was going on in Nineveh, the wickedness that that last administration perpetrated on this country, and what this new Barbados Labour Party administration is having to deal with. that first, before we can bring all of our programs and all of our policies into place and into being, as articulated by Her Excellency in the throne speech, we first have to clean up all the mess that they set before us. We first have to try to unbind our hands as they try to bind them in the last dying days of that administration. If I were to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that the last administration issued over 230 taxi permits when there were no known numbers to cover them, you would be surprised. If I were to tell you that the previous administration had a company do $28 million in work without a tender and without a contract over 10 years, you would be surprised. If I were to tell you of all of the things, paid lawyers millions of dollars, some of them for just attending meetings, millions of dollars. You know, when we as a Barbadian public reflect on the things and the wickedness that was done by that last administration, it is no wonder, Mr. Speaker, that the people spoke with such resounding words and put them at 30-0 at the last election. Because we say, Mr. Speaker, that the voice of the people is the voice of God. And we understand that. And that is why we are working night and day, to put things right in this country and to let the people of Barbados know that we are working. We are working to bring back investors. We are working to put this country back on a growth path. And let me make it absolutely clear, Mr. Speaker, that last administration could not find any growth. When I previously spoke about this, when I was in this house in the 2008 to 2013 session, every time that they came with the estimates, it was 0.something% growth. Year after year after year. They could not find growth anywhere in this country. So they swapped out growth for debt. And it meant that instead of growth, and we were accustomed to growth, under the previous Barbados Labour Party administrations, this economy would grow by 2%, 3%, 4%. We would have growth. Because growth was the way that we were able to build this economy and build this country. But that administration could not find growth anywhere. So instead of growth, they substituted it for debt. And we saw ourselves become the third most indebted country in the world. Because there was no growth, so therefore they had to go to debt. But that was the only situation, because what we did not know was that each individual state-owned entity was also accumulating debt on top of the foreign borrowing that they were doing, and domestic borrowing. So that we now find ourselves with almost every single state entity having significant debt. Debt both to government in terms of national insurance payments, debt to their persons who they get services from. You imagine, Mr. Speaker, the National Housing Corporation has a debt of $500 million. $500 million and counting. The National Housing Corporation has that kind of debt. And that's the kind of debt now that this administration is being asked to fix. And then the CBC got a debt of $30 million? And that's just two. And wherever we look, we are finding state-owned enterprises with large debts, constantly and consistently. Because there was no growth. So because there was no growth, there was no money to pay people. So instead, the last administration accumulated debt. But we are going to fix it. Because we are going to find growth. And we are going to get investors to come back to this country. Because we are going to make doing business in Barbados easier. We're going to make it easier for people to come and invest. We're going to make Barbados attractive again. We've cut out corruption because we said that we're going to pass integrity legislation, and it's before this Parliament today. It was in the throne speech. We said we're going to bring the NSRL to an end, and we did it by the second meeting of this Parliament. We said that we're going to re-equip the Ministry of Public Works with equipment, and we've done it. We've passed the 10 million, and we're going to do everything that we said in that manifesto because we mean business, because we recognize that it's not about the BLP, it's not about the DLP, it is about saving Barbados. And that is the most important thing, because we are Barbadians first. And this is not only about us, this is about generations that follow us and people not yet born. Because what we do today has a significant bearing on those that follow us tomorrow. And we stand on the shoulders of those who went before us. I stand on a great man's shoulders in the name of Sir Henry Ford, and I thank you for giving me the opportunity to mention his name in this chamber. I didn't ask permission, but I thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Speaker. Because Sir Henry Ford did a tremendous job in this country. Not only as Attorney General, not only as Member of Parliament for 34 years, member for the constituency that I now represent, leader of the opposition, and brought back the Barbados Labour Party from when it was the three blind mice to government today, from 24 to 3, I believe it was, to 30-0 today. And we stand on those men's shoulders. And I know that those men who went before us, who toiled and suffered to make this party great, and by extension, make this country great, are proud of us today. Because the men and women, Mr. Speaker, because they see that the Barbados Labour Party, this current government, is working and working hard, and we have programs and policies that will put this country back on a growth path. And people can have hope, and people can have confidence in their government. No more it will be 5 and 10 man, whatever that means. No more it will be that. No more it will be having a party and you need to get a little contribution to get that thing that you want. No more of that will be going on. People will get the services that they require based on merit and based on their ability to service that permit or that service, whatever it may be, through government. And our job is to facilitate business and to facilitate all those activities, facilitate investment, to bring a level of fairness, to bring a completely even platform to the way government dispenses all of its services. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a mammoth task, but we are up to the task. But we need the people of Barbados to work with us. We need your help. We need your commitment, because we cannot do it on our own. We need the cooperation of every single Barbadian to bring us back from the brink, to bring us back from that precipice that we have been left on by the previous administration. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that this administration recognizes that no more must the burden of taxation only be on the labor. Every single time I heard the previous administration, I knew exactly what they were going to do. They were going to bring more taxes on every single person, on the labor. When they added increases in water rates, increases in permit fees, whatever it was, bicycle tax and all, it was the people bore the burden. But this administration said, no, that cannot go on. Not only must the average person bear the burden, but the visitors to this country must bear the burden too. Capital must bear the burden too. Businesses must bear the burden too. We have to spread the load. And you heard so many times the Prime Minister say, many hands make light work. And I listened to that very carefully, although I did also hear the member for Christchurch West Central also say, no work makes light hands. And I heard that one very, very clearly too. So not only does many hands make light work, but no work will also make light hands. And I understand that. And I understand the reverse concept. And I thank the member for Christchurch West Central. And I also thank the member for Christchurch South. As you know, Mr. Speaker, I am the leader of Christchurch. That role was given to me in the election, and it has not been taken away from me because I delivered all 5 members in Christchurch. So I will always represent my Christchurch members to the best of my ability. And I'm glad to have heard the member for Christchurch South speak. And he spoke so eloquently and so forcefully that I had no choice but to get up and to respond in this matter as well. And I heard him speak about the South Coast Sewage Project. And again, a Christchurch member, and the Honourable Member for Christchurch East, who has worked so hard to get that South Coast Sewage Project handled and grappled. And I am proud to say, Mr. Speaker, that today, as I traverse all through Christchurch South and Christchurch West, that there is no sewage on the streets of Barbados. Another Christchurch member. So I know that we in Christchurch are working. And we are doing what the people have asked us to do. Because at the end of the day, it is about representing the people first, everything else after. So, Mr. Speaker, I have great confidence. And if anything, if you see the amount of work that we have done in just 2 months, and completing so many of the manifesto pledges, as articulated in the throne speech, well then, I have no doubt that we will come very close to meeting all of our objectives. And at the end of the day, the beneficiary will be Barbados, and by extension, the people of Barbados. So I want the people of Barbados to continue to have faith, continue to have hope, and work with us as we work for you and for Barbados. I'm obliged.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I listened to Her Excellency the Governor-General deliver the throne speech, it was a moment of quiet reflection where I realized just how much of a task lay before this government and before the people of this country. But as I reflect further, and I thank you for the opportunity to continue that reflection, because I feel that we have just started a very important journey and an historical journey as a country. I think that when we look back on this moment and this period, those of us who have witnessed and have participated will be able to say that we were here when Barbados came through, and that we were here when Barbados righted itself and got back on the path to transformation and success. And so I count myself extremely privileged. I do not regret the very late nights. There will be many more. Because I do feel that there can be no task there can be no calling higher, no matter where I might go or in the world have gone or will go in the future. There can be no task as honorable as what I am called to do along with my colleagues in this honorable chamber to help, along with the people of Barbados, restore this country to prosperity. And so in continuing that reflection this morning, Mr. Speaker, and as I reviewed the speech from the throne, I want to make reference to one or two parts of where we find ourselves, but really to focus on where we are going. The people of Barbados have heard, and if I speak frankly, sir, must be reminded of where we are so as not to find ourselves here again. So to those who might say that we may be spending too much time or making too much reference to the circumstances that we have inherited, I have to say respectfully that I disagree. Because the easiest way to find yourself back in an undesirable position is to forget the pain of that earlier position. The easiest way for us to come back, or to have Barbados come back to a place that we found ourselves in because of the indiscipline of the last Democratic Labour Party government, would be to fail to remind ourselves of where we never want to be again. And so I think that as a country, we do need to reflect. We do need to be reminded, because we are not out of the woods. We are far from out of the woods. And we work tirelessly, as the people of this country have elected us to do, to make sure that we never get back there. And doing that means that we're not just trying to fix a hole. We're not just trying to fill a gap, sir. We are trying to do some of the heavy lifting and some of the transformational work that at 52 years, a former colony needs to do. We need to sit back and see where we have come. We need to look at those measures and policies and habits and parts of our culture that have served us, but be willing to shed those parts that no longer serve us. And I will come to that in a few moments. I want to speak, in looking briefly at some of the parts of where we find ourselves, to the matter of addressing government's arrears, which is identified in the speech from the throne as a mission-critical policy. And as we have had our engagements with the International Monetary Fund over the last weeks and will continue to do in the coming weeks, the matter of identifying those arrears and looking at how we will address them has been front and center. In Her Excellency's throne speech, she made reference to the fact that the government of Barbados will put in place a special team that comes to work every day only to handle the matter of dealing with those arrears. But I want to speak for a minute about how those arrears, estimated at about $1.7 billion as of September 2017, but that we continue to uncover, of how they got there. The Prime Minister has said in recent days and weeks that it is important that we are able to identify and quantify the true cost of government. Because I'll tell you what has gone on for the last 10 years. It is very easy to write some figures down, to put some figures in estimates, and to bring them to this House and to say that that is what you are requesting to carry out a particular program in a particular area, and make it look, as the last government did, as if you have this balanced budget, as if you have miraculously solved all of the country's economic and financial and financing problems, when you know full well that the numbers that you have put down do not at all represent the true cost of what it takes, for example, to run the Sanitation Service Authority or to run the Barbados Water Authority. And so those numbers that we saw in previous estimates, Mr. Speaker, fail to capture willfully the fact that these entities and central government were accumulating arrears at astronomical rates. So that in fact, when you look at the country's debt position, it is not just domestic debt to the central bank or NIS or external creditors. It is also that very large arrears number that sought to hide the fact that the last government not only was not able to pay its bills, but had no intention of ever trying to do so. The Honourable Prime Minister has said, and what this cabinet is about, is showing clearly to Barbadians what it takes to run the country. We have been having an honest conversation with the people of Barbados and with the social partnership to put the numbers on the table. This is a Barbados Labour Party government, sir, that puts it all on the table because we have nothing to hide. And we have done that so we can have an honest conversation with the country about what it is that government should be resourced to deliver and what it is that can be delivered in partnership with other sectors of society, including the private sector and what we call the third sector or the NGO movement. And so for us, this matter of addressing government's arrears, making them clear, and looking at how we will seek to get them down has been an important part and continues to be an important part of how we set the baseline for transformation. Because, let us be clear, we need to set the baseline for our transformation. We cannot seek to put, as my grandmother used to say, icing on gingerbread. We need to make it all clear. We need to strip things away, see what we have, and see what then we are able to do with what we have. And so this, Mr. Speaker, gives us a clear baseline as we seek to implement the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, because I want to make something very clear. We are not beginning this journey to satisfy the International Monetary Fund. What we are seeking to do and have begun doing with the social partnership and with the people of this country is what Barbados needs. It is what we would, if we are being honest as we are, and if the country is being honest with itself. This business of deconstructing government and reconstructing it so that it is fit for purpose is something that this country needs. And we do so with the much-needed partnership of the fund and other international actors. But we don't do this because of the IMF. We do this because of the people of this country, because this is what they need and this is what will provide the platform for their success, which is what this government is about. But sir, I want to move on in my short intervention to look at beyond the recovery, because Barbados will recover. It will not be easy, but nothing that is worth having is ever easy. And I say that as somebody, and my colleague from St. Michael's South will attest, who is very busy trying to make sure that we present our best selves for the crop over season. Nothing that is worth having comes easily. But I want to move very quickly to the transformational agenda, because I want Barbadians to understand that we are not doing this just to be able to stop a gap or fix a fiscal issue. We are doing this because without it, we will not be able to embark on the transformation that Barbadians deserve, quite frankly. That yes, we have promised as a government, but if we do not transform from here, I am not sure where we would be going. I am not sure why my colleagues and I in this honorable house would be here. And so I want to look at a few points. I want to begin, sir, with looking at our regional commitments and the Caribbean single market and economy very quickly. Because, you know, life often brings you many ironies, and some of them don't take very long to manifest. Far from ever so welcome wait for a call that we will have to be apologizing for as the government of Barbados probably for the next few decades, Barbados now finds itself with its neighbor Guyana projected to grow at 28 to 29% per year over the next 5 years at least. And this is because of the bounty in oil that the country has discovered. And so far from having the insular posture of the last Democratic Labour Party administration that sought to unceremoniously make invisible the contribution of our regional neighbors to this country's economy and well-being, we now find ourselves in the position of having to knock. And thank goodness, sir, for the vision and leadership of the Honourable Prime Minister in these matters. Because I would say that now that we are knocking, countries like Guyana are not responding to us as we have responded to them under the past administration. And we find ourselves in a position where if we position ourselves right, as we must, we stand and our citizens stand to benefit from the bounty that Guyana finds before it. And so what will that look like? We have to make sure that the freedom of movement of our people is sufficiently established and able to proceed with sufficient ease that we may be able to offer professional services and other kinds of services to the country as it prepares itself for this growth. Rapid growth, Mr. Speaker, can be almost as detrimental as no growth. A country has to be ready for it. A region has to be ready for it. Because what you may find among those in the international industry who want to benefit from the resources of small countries like Guyana, you may find that the country becomes overwhelmed and overrun. And so we need to rally around our neighbors, but we also need to make sure that as a part of the CSME framework, that our people are equipped to be able to provide services to a country that perhaps does not have the level of professional service development and delivery that Barbados has developed. And that is the irony, sir, of where we find ourselves with the CSME and Barbados relative to its neighbors. And that's why they say, sir, too, be careful who you step on your way up, because you don't know who you might need to ask to help you on your way down. And so it is important that as lead Prime Minister on the Caribbean single market and economy, that the Honourable Prime Minister was able to sign on behalf of the people of Barbados a protocol on contingent rights. That is important because, sir, when people move, they don't just move as workers. They don't just move with whatever skill or service they're seeking to provide, but they move as people. They move with their families, they move with their wives, husbands, partners, children, grandparents, parents. And so, as full people, they need to make sure that the country that they are going to is in a position to offer them access to basic education and healthcare and other kinds of services that people need. And so the protocol on contingent rates has been important for that. And I think it is possibly one of the most important landmarks in the history of Barbados with respect to the Caribbean single market and economy. We have spoken about this protocol for some time, lamenting the fact that it has taken so long. And so it is with pride that we reflect now, sir, on the fact that Barbados has taken that step and is preparing itself to more fully embrace and lead on the true actualization of the Caribbean single market and economy such that it benefits our people. And so we must make sure, sir, that we are ready for the regional economy to grow. Because Barbados and Barbadians have always been people who see themselves not just as ready to solve Barbados' problems, but certainly ready to solve the region's problems and the world's problems. Barbadians have always had lofty goals, and it is the role of this government to make sure that we facilitate those goals. I want to move secondly, sir, to another aspect of the transformational agenda that is outlined in the throne speech. And it has to do with having an entrepreneur in every home. Now, when this Barbados Labour Party made a reference to and adopted a policy of having a graduate in every household, it was thought by some to be too lofty, because again, we are just getting past the trauma of a Democratic Labour Party administration that wanted its people to be poor, peaceful, and polite. And this is not what Barbadians are about. But we prioritize a graduate in every household, sir, not just to say you have a piece of paper, but the fact is that it matters what is the highest level of education in a household. It matters. When at least one member of a household, sir, has higher earning power, it affects each of the other members of that household. And we have the data. It affects the levels of health and well-being in that household. Because when you have a home where there is at least one person who understands things like self-care and what it takes to make sure you access the relevant health services, who understand things like education and why it is important, it raises the average standard of living, sir, of every member of that household. And so it has been important to have as many graduates per home as we can, not just because we think pieces of paper make any one person better than another, but because in Barbados we do have, and we have had the history of a competitive labor force. And people need to be given the tools, not just in terms of university degrees, but certainly technical and vocational skills, and really any training that allows you to be able to earn a decent wage. Because the truth is, sir, that we do not just want to be creating jobs at one level, creating jobs that generate lower levels of income. We want to create, sir, jobs that generate income at multiple levels. We want to be able to make sure that our people are poised to increase their earning potential. And so beyond a graduate in every household, sir, the new policy as part of our transformational agenda has to do with having an entrepreneur in every home. And I want to speak to this idea of having an entrepreneur in every home. because I think we have romanticized a bit the idea of entrepreneurship. And I say that with no apologies. I think we believe that it just takes an idea and all of a sudden the bounty will come, the money will come, the success will come. It's not that simple. Entrepreneurship has to be fostered. As the Honourable Member for St. George South will attest, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of those sleepless nights that I alluded to earlier. But entrepreneurship has to be fostered because you're not just making the entrepreneur capable of delivering, but you have to create the markets. You have to create the enabling environment. You have to be able to facilitate that market. And the truth is that markets in this country are small. Yes, you want an entrepreneur in every home, but you also want him or her to have the market to be able to sell his or her good or service and get money for it. And one of the things that we have romanticized about entrepreneurship is that we think that you just set up a business and that it will do well. But a business needs to be capitalized, and that is why, sir, we have developed our trust loan program. Because often these businesses do not need a lot of resources, but they need an initial investment to be able to get off the ground. But we also need, sir, to help create the markets. And that is also why the single market and economy is important. That is also why further integration into the regional economy is important. Because it is not every good or service that a Barbados market will satisfy. And so when we speak, sir, about regional commitments under the CSME, and when we speak about entrepreneurship, we speak about these things hand in hand. And I want to say that the measures outlined in this throne speech are not presented in isolation. Whether it is education for development, or looking at entrepreneurship, looking at our trust loan program, or even how we are ready to handle disasters. Every part of this hangs together for economic development. And so we need to make sure that people have the skills to be entrepreneurs. It comes back to how we educate. And certainly education for development is one of those things that has to be unpacked, deconstructed, and reconstructed. I remember saying almost 2 years ago now, when I had the honor to deliver the Grantley Adams Memorial Lecture, that we have had an education system that has served us well for certain things. It has served us well in certain ways. But we now need to be able to move that system to the next level. We now need to raise a country of young people that are willing to take risks. And so when we say that every child must have the opportunity to learn to swim, and every child must have the opportunity to learn a second language, it is not because we are just looking to create after-school activities. It is because we understand that if you are made to function in an environment that is not your own, if you, as a creature that walks on 2 feet on land, now have to get comfortable with navigating a vast ocean or body of water that is not your natural environment, it increases your appetite for risk. It removes the fear and the trepidation, and makes young people realize, I don't have to be 100% comfortable and warm in any environment. I can step out into a new environment that is not my own and be prepared to do well. It is the same reason we talk about having a second language, sir, not just because of our proximity to our neighbors, Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and the Dutch-speaking Caribbean, but also because when you are made to operate in a language that is not your native language, you have to start to feel a little silly and to be ready to make mistakes, but to realize that making a mistake is not the end of the world. That if you use the wrong word to describe something in the Dominican Republic or in Cuba or in Venezuela, and somebody laughs at you, that is all right. And these may sound like simple ideas, Mr. Speaker, sir, but these are at the heart of how we need to transform our educational system for the development of our country. We need to have our people understand, and we all need to understand, that it is okay to take certain risks, to feel a little foolish, to make yourself a little vulnerable if you're going to be able to acquire or achieve something great. Our educational
Honourable member
system,
has 5 more minutes.
thank you, sir. Our educational system has therefore to prepare people not just for jobs, but for life. Needs to be able to prepare people, sir, to be able to understand what service is as we further develop our service economy. To be able to understand that if I walk into a shop, sir, yes, I have walked into your space, and this is a very Bajan thing, but you want me there. So you are the one to greet me and say, good morning, how can I help you? Small things like this. How we get our young people ready to adapt to and to use technology. To be able to make sure that we're not looking at science, technology, engineering and math training, but also arts training. Because it has been proven over and over that while the world had moved to science and technology and engineering and math, saying that this is what young people need more of, which they do, they also need an appreciation of the arts. How to open your mind and think critically and be able to appreciate different cultures and different people. These are all the things, sir, that will stand us in good stead for our transformation. And I speak to these things this morning, sir, even as we continue to engage international institutions on our recovery program, because I want Barbadians to understand that this is not just about fiscal recovery. This is not just about making sure that we can pay our bills, which is important. But we do all this, sir, to provide the platform for Barbados to launch itself again into future success. That is why we are here. And so we are asking Barbadians, sir, to stay with us, to understand that this is not a short-term exercise. This is a transformation that will take time. But, sir, we make this promise to the people of this country, that at every stage, at every turn, we will communicate and engage and consult. Because it's not just those of us in here who have something to say or something to contribute. And so, as I end my reflections on this throne speech, sir, I say that I remain hopeful. I believe that Barbados is on its way back up. But we need for the people of Barbados to stick their heels in and to realize that it is not one problem we are solving or one job to do, but that we must be willing to multitask. We must be willing to address this country's progress and transformation at multiple levels, in multiple ways, and in partnership with each other. And with those few words, sir, I am obliged to go.
The honourable member for St. Lucie.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to make my contribution this morning to this debate in endorsing the throne speech of Her Excellency given on June 5th, 2018. The people of Barbados, over the past 10 years prior to then, had been made to endure a life that was harsh, something that they were not accustomed to. They were made to endure a lot of pain because of the irresponsible actions of an uncaring government. The people of Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir, knew at some point in time that their turn would have come. And quietly, they went about their business prior to on May 24th. They went about the business of making decisive change. They went about the business of bringing into office a government that they knew, which had looked after them for 14 years between 1994 and 2008, and they entrusted the reins of government in this Barbados Labour Party on May 24th. And so, Mr. Speaker, at sunrise or in the wee hours of May 25th, the people of Barbados arose to welcome a new day, to usher in new government, to usher in policies that they knew would benefit them. Because for weeks and indeed months, as they followed the Barbados Labour Party, they had the opportunity to listen to carefully, to dissect, and to examine those policies which we had proposed. And therefore, they knew quite well that once this party was elected into government, they could rest assured that the policies that we had spoken about or the plans that we had shared with them would be implemented. And this was further cemented, Mr. Speaker, by the throne speech given on June 5th, 2018. In this speech, Mr. Speaker, we told Barbadians, or we confirmed our desire to rid Barbados of that onerous tax called the NSRL. We told Barbados that we would restore or we would repay the fees that students going to UE, the tuition fees that students going to UE had now been asked to pay by the previous administration. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, sir, such a burden on parents, such as gas attendants, cashiers, clerical officers, merchandisers, these parents did not have the wherewithal to support or to send to university their sons and daughters who had great potential. Mr. Speaker, sir, civil servants in this country, despite the high taxes that were inflicted on them by the previous administration, were asked or did not get a raise of pay for 7+ years. Mr. Speaker, we had a country characterized with high road taxes, bad roads, a health system that was beginning to fail because we had endless problems at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, our premier health institution. Mr. Speaker, crime began to wave its ugly head more and more across the society. In other words, people were becoming lawless, they were becoming restless, and hence they began to do things to break the law, to express themselves and the frustration that was in them. And Mr. Speaker, when the Barbados Labour Party, or Her Excellency the Governor General, delivered herself of that throne speech, outlining the policies of this new administration, Barbadians breathed a sigh of relief. There was new optimism. There was hope, Mr. Speaker, in what this party had to say. And I want to say today, Mr. Speaker, that from as far north in this country to as far south in Christchurch, people felt, as we move around today, people are expressing that hope and that confidence in this Barbados Labour Party administration. No longer are you hearing the cries of despondency, and yes, there may be one or two, Mr. Speaker, but people genuinely believe that the policies of this administration that have been recited and read within the throne speech, Mr. Speaker, these policies will redound to their benefit. They're saying to us, Mr. Speaker, yes, we know times will be hard, but we are prepared to give you that opportunity and to give you that time to right the numerous wrongs that we have found, that you have found in this country. And I do not understand, Mr. Speaker, how uncaring a government could be that having implemented or put in place so many harsh taxes, and now that we have come to government, we recognize that as difficult as the previous administration tried to make Barbadians believe that it was, and indeed it was tough, but when you see the amount of contracts, the amount of wastage, the amount of squandermania that took place, it is actually shameful that any administration could inflict such pain upon the masses of this country, and while at the same time, Mr. Speaker, their friends and family reap the benefits, reap the sweets with contracts. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, there are people from your constituency in Bush Hall who've had it rough. There are people from my constituency in Bourbon and in Crab Hill. People from the Honourable Member for St. John's constituency, Welch and Edgecliff, and all across this country. People were made to see it rough because of the bad administration that we had. And you know what is really, really painful, Mr. Speaker, is that these same people, these same persons now have to endure, while people walk away, having been voted out of office, they're going to live comfortable. They're going to live comfortable because they would have had their pensions and so on, and whatever else. I don't know whatever else they took or they gave themselves, but I can only speak today about the pensions and the gratuities, the large amounts that they will walk away with, Mr. Speaker. And my constituents and your constituents and constituents from Christchurch West Central and Christchurch East and from St. James South have to endure the pain that will be needed to repair the damage that was done to this country. But I am confident, and they have expressed that confidence in us, Mr. Speaker, in us, the Barbados Labour Party. As I said, a new hope. We have abolished the road tax. It was in his throne speech, we abolished the road tax. Mr. Speaker, we are buying you equipment for the Ministry of Transport and Works to get Barbados looking clean and decent again, to fix the bad roads that in spite of the highest amount of road tax that people were ever asked to pay, nothing was done by the previous administration. But this Barbados Labour Party administration, Mr. Speaker, has not only said what it would do, but we've committed it because it was in our throne speech and it was laid here on June 11th in the budget by the Honourable Prime Minister. This is a party of action, Mr. Speaker. In addition to that, and having abolished in SRL, we are bringing to this Honourable House, I believe very soon, to see the Honourable Member for St. George South. In his ministry, the trust loans, where young entrepreneurs would get a chance to establish themselves, to establish their business, and if they have a business already, to boost their business, to make a contribution to this country, Mr. Speaker. This is what this Barbados Labour Party administration promised, and this is what we are going to deliver. We are going, Mr. Speaker, sir, not only with the trust loans, but in this 21st century Barbados, we still have families. And I recall, Mr. Speaker, I recall very well, a first-time voter sent a message to me through WhatsApp outlining situations in his household. And one of the things that was said, up to now, we do not have, or we still bathe outside, we do not have a bathroom. We still use pit toilets. This Barbados Labour Party administration, under the astute leadership of the Honourable Prime Minister, we have brought a policy that the pit toilets will be eliminated across this country. Because in a 21st century Barbados, Mr. Speaker, I cannot, and I know about pit toilets because I grew up with them, and I'm not afraid to say that. But that was a thing of the past. I understand what it is to have to get up at 1 o'clock or 1 a.m. You have a call of nature. Maybe if you drank some bad milk or something and had to go outside, whether the rain falling hard or it's drizzling. But this caring Barbados Labour Party administration will seek to eliminate pit toilets from across this society, because we believe that Barbadians deserve better, and we will do our very best to help, despite the times, I hear the Honourable Member say, Michael East, despite the times may be rough, and we're asking people to go on a long journey for the next 2-3 years, but we are giving them some breakfast, a glass of juice. Sometimes we sorry say, come, you use this, and this will help you. And we believe the people of Barbados, when they went to the polls and gave us 30 seats, they had great confidence in us, and we say to them today that we will not disappoint. We have hit the ground running, and we will continue to work hard because Barbadians deserve it. And this Barbados Labour Party administration will deliver. We said to the pensioners, that we will increase your pension. And the pensioners of Josale have said to me, yes, we got it. It has been, you mentioned it, you have kept your promise. This is what this Barbados Labour Party administration is about. Not just words, but action, and decisive action as well, Mr. Speaker. Minimum wage. Minimum wage, Mr. Speaker. We have spoken about it, and if you read the throne speech, Mr. Speaker, it is in there from $6.25 per hour to $8 per hour, extending to all workers. This is an administration that will always keep its word to the people of Barbados, because we believe that to whom much is given, much is expected, and we will not disappoint. So in my short intervention, Mr. Speaker, I want to say, like in that song I sing at my church on Sundays, and I will not in any way be bluffed. It said, "Low in the grave he lay, Jesus my Savior, waiting the coming day, Jesus my Lord." Barbadians waited for that day. They waited with bated breath. They went out quietly and they exercised their right. And today we see, up from the grave Barbados will arise with a mighty triumph o'er the foe, because we have gotten rid of them. And I say as well, like that great civil rights leader, Martin Luther King Jr., free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
She's good.
The honourable member for St. Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to thank the honourable member for St. Michael West for giving way to me. He probably recognizes that age comes before handsomeness. And of course, I am grateful for the privilege, sir, to be here today and to be a part of this discussion and to speak to the throne speech, as was laid in this honorable chamber. I want to say, sir, how happy I am today to be a part of this dynamic team of Barbadians from the Barbados Labour Party who will help to carry this country forward for the next 5 years, and I hope another 5 and another 5 and another 5 will be for the young ones who are here, because their heads are in the right places and they have earned the opportunity to become the members of parliament in this Barbados to make a difference in the lives of Barbadians who over a 10-year period were crushed to the ground. Their dignity was taken away from many of them who were sent home unceremoniously. Some who were ostracized and victimized, and so many other different things happened to them that they were afraid to even speak. But they spoke with their pen, sir, on the 24th of May, and they have made a tremendous difference. I want to say, sir, that unless the Lord watches the city, the watchman watcheth in vain. That is my interpretation. And I'm sure the bishop, sir, will want to agree with me, even though it might not be in the exact expression as it is in the Bible, the sense that it says that God has been watching this country and will continue to watch it, but we must make sure that we keep confiding in him, relying on him to give us the courage, to give us the strength, to give us the ability and the necessary resources to take Barbados to the next level. We would have been pushed back by the 10-year period of another administration, and we all know that. And I'm not going to be regurgitating the wrong that has done. I just want to go forward with what we have started in the vanguard of making sure that Barbadians enjoy a better life. Our slogan, our motto in the Barbados Labour Party is a better life for our people and for generations, indeed for the 80 years that we have been a political party, one of the most outstanding in the world and the best in this hemisphere for me. We shall continue to look after the people of Barbados, because people matter. And there are people from the Caribbean who wonder how we get it done. But we will look after them too, through the CSME and the other various institutions that have been set up to make sure that people generally are treated well. The Bible also says, unless you do it unto these, my children, you do it unto me. And we have a responsibility. We have made pledges to the people of Barbados, and I believe these pledges should be kept as far as possible. And I can understand how disaster and challenges in the economy will cause us to drop from those plans. But with God's help and the astute leadership of the honourable member the Honourable Prime Minister, the member for St. Michael North East, we shall be able to go forward, making sure that the manifestos of the Barbados Labour Party, as have always been judged, they've been tested, and they have been proven that the manifesto of the Labour Party is a social contract. And we shall come with our pledges, and we shall also follow up later on, sir, with the performances as we have done throughout the various decades. So in the speech delivered by Her Excellency, sir, it focused on Barbadians and going forward. And it points the way towards hope, prosperity, accountability, integrity, good governance, equity, and quality service to the people of this dear beloved country. I want to say, sir, that we have delivered as a party in 1994 when we said job number one is job. That was delivered. We said we will give back the 8% to those civil servants whose salaries were cut, and we did it. We did so many other projects, and that is why a Labour Party lasted for 14 prosperous years during that period. 14 straight years of quality service that when we left office in 2008, we were termed to be on the stepping stones of becoming a developed country. As a matter of fact, the United Nations representative said we were punching above our weight and could not understand how Barbados got it done. It was because of the astute leadership of our then Right Honourable Prime Minister, and I believe that this Honourable Prime Minister now will follow in his footsteps and carry this country forward. I want to say, sir, as was said by the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, that the mission critical has really caught on to our ears, because we know that we were so far out to sea with the IMF challenges that were being talked about, with the various fractures in our institutions, particularly our ministries, where the roads, the buses, the garbage, the police force, and the judiciary and others were really reeling under the pressure. And Mission Critical said, there are some matters that are so important and so critical, they must be tackled immediately. And thank God the Barbados Labour Party has hit the ground running. And so we went straight to the South Coast with the sewage project up there that was belching out sewage on our streets and in our beaches for months. And we could not see a minister come to speak to it. Our young dynamic ministers, sir, have come to the fore and have made a difference. One man called on the radio last week and said, when I pass up there now, I am smelling the chicken from a particular place. We did not smell it for months. The sewage odor was above all of that. That tells you something good has happened. So the honourable member for Christchurch East and his team must be commended, highly commended, for taking the bull by the horn and wrestling it to the ground. We have the seaweeds. For quite a long time, we were hearing about the seaweeds and the challenges. Thank God there are none in St. Thomas. I hope there never will be. And so you will know why. But this Barbados Labour Party determined that the ministers responsible for the environment and so on must get out there on the streets, go up to the various beaches and ensure that the seaweed is controlled. The honourable member for Christchurch, he came in about 2 weeks ago with a bottle of something that has been made from the seaweeds that we can put it now to help to nourish the plants. And there are other projects that are coming on board because we have visionary young people who will try to find some great opportunities to develop businesses using that seaweed that will normally be dumped in some gully and the odor will just destroy our noses. That too is an ongoing project, and I want to praise those Barbadians who have come out and come on board to assist, whether it be in a voluntary way or in a way where they have to be paid, because we know it will cost money. But at the end of the day, we are looking at tourism. We are looking at our people working in the industry. We are looking at the beauty and the ambience of Barbados. And that is the reason why that young team of dynamic ministers and members of parliament have gone to the various beaches with the NCC, the National Conservation Commission, and other agencies to make sure that the seaweeds are dealt with and controlled, to make our beaches accessible again to locals as well as to visitors. We know of the challenges in the sewage plants in Bridgetown. That too has been tackled, and I passed yesterday and saw a team of persons clearing the spot that is nearest to it, because when it catches your eye, it was really a depressed looking environment. A building was there, it was demolished, and then all the garbage and all that. A team of gentlemen and ladies were there yesterday doing the cleaning. That is what I call being effective in a new institution and meeting the needs of Barbadians. We have no buses in St. Thomas Hall now, and I'm going to speak to the Honourable Minister. The few that have been sent there are not fulfilling their roads. My people in Lancaster and Highland are so suffering again, because in the past administration, having come and found over 260 buses operational, did not buy a single bus, and now we can't even tell you we have 60. And every road you step on, you see a broken down bus. This Barbados Labour Party has gone ahead as a new government, and buses are being ordered to put back Barbadians to work. If you can't get a bus to get out of St. John, St. Thomas, St. Lucie, St. Andrew, and St. Philip, and those far out communities, you will lose that job because of how the business sector is now. The Labour Party has sought to make sure that that project will come on stream and that those buses will be on the road again. Garbage trucks, mine gets picked up once every 4 weeks or 6 weeks. This Barbados Labour Party has put a system, and I believe before we get to Independence Day, we should have fleets of trucks on the road to carry out the duties. And the millions of dollars that were spent by the last administration, we cannot see with the naked eye a new bus, a new truck for sanitation, hardly anything new except the things that are new that help to fleece, or that were fleeced in some way by others who knew them or they know the persons. It is a shame where we have dropped to, but this Barbados Labour Party will put back hope and prosperity in the lives of Barbadians through its efforts in changing things around. The Welfare Department, sir, was given a $5 million amount despite all the challenges that we have. Poor people must not fall through the cracks any further. And I see it every day. I know it because I live in the community. And people have been suffering for a long time. And to set up constituency councils, and then people get overlooked because they were not supporting a political party according to some of them, was wrong. Our people have been suffering too long. That $5 million will be used to help to ensure that Barbadian children get them to get some school clothing, some books, some supplies. It will help poor people to get an extra meal on the table. It will help others to be able to pay for their medication and to sort themselves out. That is critical to making sure that Barbadians, and poor people at that, get a better quality life, that the light gets put back on, that the water gets, it gets paid, that they can help to pay for the housing that they live in, because many of them have lost their work through another administration that really did not care. They did not care who suffered as long as they were able to fleece their nests with the new houses they have built and the fussy cars they've been driving, and poor people who went out and voted for them, relying on them to fulfill their manifesto, they're disappointed. Mr. Speaker, I also want to indicate that some people who have suffered as a result of evictions, that is happening every day. There's nobody in the household working. The ones who are working are only receiving a small wage. And then to feed the children, to pay the house rent, to buy clothing, to buy meals, and so it really is very, very difficult. The Welfare Department will assist those who are suffering in that way. In education, sir, we pledged to reintroduce the payment of the tuition fees. And it hurts me to know that students from the University of the West Indies had to go away from studying. They had to curtail their dream, as every Barbadian has, of excelling in life, of studying and gaining a degree, gaining some certificates, whatever it is that is a qualification to be able to improve the quality of their lives and that of families and others around them. That opportunity was stolen from them by a Democratic Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, and it has left them in a state. This Barbados Labour Party recognizes that Barbadians must get back to work, that Barbadians must study if they must be on the cutting edge to match the skills and the educational exploits that are out there in the world, and therefore we have determined the tuition fees will be paid again for Barbadian students, and I advise them, take advantage on it. None will stay in the university for 10 years doing a first degree like a former honourable member in here from the other side. It took away a lot of money and funding from other persons who could have gone there. A 10-year period to do a first degree is wrong. We are not going to tolerate that, Mr. Speaker. Those young people must go in there seriously and take advantage of the opportunity, because the taxpayers are paying for their tuition. And it is important that they're determined, sir, that they are going to go there and tithe their time in communities, in various institutions, because when you get something, you have to give back something. And it is important that that culture of giving and offering of service to the society gets right back into our lives, because it is an attitude of gratitude when these young people and others who are studying come back and give back. I call it operational give back. It is integral to us going forward to show that we are grateful, we are thankful, we respect and honor what is being done for us. That vision was killed, and the father of independence, he too is reeling in his grave or wherever he is because of what has happened to the vision that he had for Barbadians going forward. Mr. Speaker, I also want to refer to our seniors. And I have not thought to look after seniors because I fit the profile. You call this proper aging. I want to say, sir, that our aged have suffered as well. The youth have suffered, the middle-aged have suffered, the aged have suffered. So in essence, everybody in Barbados suffered under the Democratic Labour Party, except their own. Friends and family, they did not. But I know they're suffering now because you can't even see one of them on the road. You can't even find them on the phone because they understand what they did was wrong to the people of Barbados. And I want to say that our seniors are special because they are the ones who are the pillars of this society. Our seniors are the ones who toiled in the cane fields. They toiled in businesses day and night to build this society that we have got a foundation on which we can stand. And it is unfortunate that our seniors who would have done excellent contributions in every sphere of life would have been treated in the way that the Democratic Labour Party would have treated them. The taxes were so heavy on most of them. The handling fee, they had to pay for medication. Sometimes they went to the polyclinics and so on. The medication wasn't available. They had to take out the pension to buy it. They had children who were sent home. They had to take some of the pension money to feed the children. And it is so sad, the negative things that happened over that period of time. 10 years, Mr. Speaker, 10 years of suffering, sir, is a long time. We now need to put prosperity into the lives of Barbadians, so we deserve this 5 years and another 5 and another 5, because I know and I'm confident, I may be dead and gone, I'm confident that the Barbados Labour Party will make a difference in the lives of seniors and others. The non-contributory pensions from $155 to $225 every week. The seniors are happy, Mr. Speaker. They won't let me step in the church good. Mistress, tell your boss I say thank you. That is one thing in the culture of seniors. They never forget the bridge that they have crossed. And they show gratitude to God because they are feeling a little better when they go to purchase the medication, when they send someone to buy the groceries, when they have to do whatever with the funds. It has made a difference. And I want to let those that are contributory pensioners know we are examining the whole process as well. But we felt that those who were on the non-contributory pensions were feeling it, and it was reeling in their hearts and their households more than some other places. But we are giving some consideration, because at the end of the day, each Barbadian matters where the Labour Party is concerned. The downgrades threw us down the hill. The IMF approaches that were being touted, that helped to deal with us too, although we know we have to find a creative way that will be a little more tasteful, that Barbadians can live comfortably in their homes. The bad roads, the poor health service, so many things impacted on us. We will work hard to improve this economy with the measures that we will institute as a government to make sure that Barbadians live a better life, and that our seniors, our children and others can feel safe and comfortable in the environment in which they live. Too many of our seniors are being abused, Mr. Speaker, and I think it is about time that Barbadians speak to the issue and bring a measure of relief. And this Labour Party will look at the legislation to help our seniors to be better protected, not only from strangers, but some families, some friends, some caregivers and others, and some lawyers. And it is wrong. And if we treat our aged like that, what else or who else would we ill-treat if that is what is happening? And not if that is what was happening, because I see it and I hear it every day. In that ministry where I am, people come to the house and all to complain. And that is the kind of personality I am. That's the kind of personality I want in public life anyhow, that people can reach you and they can share. You won't get everything done, but once you give them a listening ear and you make an effort, it will make a difference. And that's the message to these young, distinguished ladies and gentlemen here. Stick to your people. When you stick to your people, you can't go wrong. Fulfill their needs. So I'm begging Barbadians, keep the faith. For the disabled, sir, they will soon be relocated in the institution that has been retrofitted to accommodate them. They don't have to worry about the steps anymore. In another 3 weeks or so, they will relocate to another place where they can have better access and that they can pursue their various dreams. I also want, sir, to refer to the enactment of full non-discrimination and equal opportunity discrimination legislation to better move forward to fully integrate persons with disabilities. We know that many of our disabled are treated very unkindly. And I'm not talking about parking in the spots alone, but I want to refer to them getting employment. We know that there was a slogan one year that says, disability is not inability. And many of us are now aware of the large number of Barbadians who are disabled because persons have been taught and encouraged, so we take them to schools. Institutions have been established to accommodate most of them, if not all, but they go to school. But we see some of them come up with excellent subjects. The other place, sir, had an honourable member there who was blind and did a fantastic job during her period of tenure. So it says that the disabled in this country can make a tremendous difference. Everybody knows a man who always was on the radio station at Ready Fusion as an Uncle Carson, and then later he was working with the disabled. He would bring programs on Sunday morning. One of the best men I have met in the world. And he offered his service to the people of that department. And there's so many others. Disability is not inability, and we must engage them. We must ensure that there's better transportation to facilitate them to and from school and from work. The Labour Party must continue to do it. We had buses, but the Transport Board to help to facilitate that need. Those buses are no longer functioning. Housing for the disabled, transportation, skills training, and better education. The Barbados Labour Party is going to look after them. I am ashamed at the number of persons who gang up and they treat them unkindly, they beat them, they insult them, they criticize them, they rob them of their possessions. It is sad, and I condemn anyone in Barbados, and I want the police officers to carry out their duties, because the disabled are people too, and their needs must be met, and they must not be in any way compromised. The other thing we're looking at, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure that will happen from this throne speech, or the speech from the throne, is to develop the phase program so that the island's public buildings and our sidewalks and our main highways will become fully accessible over time. I know efforts have been made as well. The Honourable Member for Christchurch West, he has a responsibility for the Ministry of Public Works, and I believe that he too will start to go forward. I am not going to touch too much on the pit toilet project, but I too share the concerns, because I would have grown up in the time of the pit toilet, and we made sure that our pit toilet was always very clean and tidy. Always clean and tidy, because that's where girls had to sit particularly. But yes, the cockroaches, we know of them. We know of them. And it says that that has not changed. That is the reason why we must look at it. You had to drop in lighted newspaper to see those cockroaches scatter at night. And I like what the Honourable Member for St. Lucie said, and I hope that the people of St. Lucie continue to show their gratitude, because when you compare that performance just now with what was here before, 80% is 20% is more than 80, then you know that we have a man of worth on the other side here by me, sir. But I want to say that the pit toilet project is fantastic, and it helps to give people their dignity. Pregnant women going out in the little rugged yard in the early hours of the morning. Outside is dark, the rain is falling. Senior citizens who are disabled, young people who are disabled, they can't get out. Somebody has to be there to give them assistance. And it takes away that dignity, because sometimes the paling falls down. People can see when you come up, you have to be fully dressed all the time. We have been through it, most of us, and we know. And therefore, this is the vision of a Labour Party, to help to eliminate that pit toilet and provide waterborne facilities. And it has not just started here. It started under rural and urban way back in 1996. But we could not do it all, and we had to have the process stymied when the government changed and the concentration was not the same. I pray that the landlords and the landladies would give that opportunity to those persons when they are approached, because sometimes we don't know what will befall us. And we need to think and love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And I can understand the constraints at times, but it is the heart, the human heart, that must come to the fore to save that little old lady, that little old man, that disabled child, that pregnant woman, that person with the broken legs, and so on and so forth. This is visionary. And I pray that Barbadians will be able to get the benefits. But that is on the cards and shall be unraveled soon, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member has 2 more minutes.
Yes, please. I will wrap up on the homeless then, sir, because the Clydolop Centre and the Lancaster House had to make provision for some persons who are homeless. And I believe that we need to get to look after those who are homeless even more at this time. Homeless persons are on the road, and it's not only because they have been evicted, but it is also because of some mental kind of concern. And we cannot have persons walking around in the city, in other communities, half naked, pushing things in the visitors' face and in ours. And then when we see them congregate, and I'll speak about that till I die, Mr. Speaker, whether folks in here like it or not, there's nothing more demeaning and embarrassing than the team that has to go over there every evening to be fed. I want to thank those agencies that have come on board. Working with the government, the Salvation Army is one, the Vagrancy and Homeless Society is one, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is one, and there's some other institutions that do it discreetly to feed the homeless. And we acknowledge why homelessness would happen. You get evicted, your house is lost by some kind of disaster, and so on, and therefore you are unable to have a new place to live. And therefore, I want for us to be able, we've started to make plans as to how we will find another facility, because the homeless must not just stay there, but they can be trained. Those who are not mentally ill in the way that some of them would be, those who can be trained can go to do skills training and so on. Some of them can get employment. We can pull families together as a result, because some families are displaced as a result of domestic violence and other challenges within families, as we know. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you, because I close on this note to speak to the whole relationship of this government with the tripartite team, the social partnership, because without joining with them to be able to look at the entire picture as to where we can chart the course for Barbados, we are saying nothing. We are what the young people say, spinning top in mud. And so I am glad that the tripartite approach has been done with the unions and the business people and the government to make sure that whatever we do, we make them aware, we bring them along, we solicit their advice and support and so on. And thank God for the Barbados Labour Party. Civil servants will get a little something on their salaries when the month comes, because they don't only want it, Mr. Speaker, they really, really need it in order for them to meet their various commitments on a weekly, monthly basis as well. And so I want to highly commend this speech from the throne and to thank all Barbadians, particularly the people of St. Thomas, for giving me this opportunity, because whatever happens with these projects, my people in St. Thomas and the people across Barbados, despite whether they were supporters of another side or institution or not, at the end of the day, we are one people, one country, and it is our responsibility as a government to look after every Barbadian and to help to meet his or her needs, because united we stand, divided we fall. I wish to thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that we postpone consideration of the private member's bill until after lunch.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be postponed until after the lunch session. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The private member's business is postponed until after the lunch session.
Statements by ministers.
Mr. Speaker, the Cabinet of Barbados has authorized me to deliver this ministerial statement concerning the payment of tuition fees by government on behalf of Barbadian undergraduate students at the University of the West Indies, Barbados Community College, and Urdeston Teachers Training College. Barbadians of all walks of life and all political persuasions regard as the cornerstone of our social and economic development or access to free education at the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels. The right to education is a basic human right. Furthermore, investing in our most abundant resource, that is our people, makes sound economic sense. Thus, we regard facilitating access to education through state subsidies as both a moral obligation and an economic strategy. The noted rankings that Barbados has consistently enjoyed on the United Nations Human Development Index, the progress that we have made in economic diversification and development since our independence in 1966, neither of these would have been a reality at all, or would not have been a reality in the time frame that they did become so if successive governments had not adhered to the policy of free education for our citizens. Some voices over the years, while recognizing all that I have just said, have nevertheless argued that continued free education is untenable at the tertiary level because of the scale of the costs, and that it is no longer justifiable because of the general performance of the students. I recall, sir, that in 1996, there was a report of the Shorey Commission where the leader of that commission advocated that students should meet the cost of their tuition, and the members of the commission considered that they should meet half the cost of the tuition. The government, however, rejected both positions and remained faithful to its commitment to subsidize the cost of tertiary tuition for Barbadian students at the University of the West Indies. That said, government now continues consistent in its policy because we consider that the same logic that justified it in 1996 and that justified it 5 decades ago continues to justify it. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, the government of Barbados will take urgent steps to restore free tertiary education at the University of the West Indies for Barbadians, a fundamental support which was withdrawn from our citizens and mostly women in 2013. Sir, as you may recall, it was on the 13th of July of 2013 when the then Minister of Finance presented his annual financial statement and budgetary proposals. The minister said, "Our macroeconomic program has gone off track and needs to be brought back into line with what we believe is consistent with the objectives required for economic sustainability, characterized by growing international reserves, exchange rate stability, sustainable and balanced economic growth, and adequate yet affordable social services provision, end quote. In the said statement, the minister noted that the Cave Hill campus had expanded its intake considerably in 2003, so that there were, according to the statistics that he then quoted, approximately 3,568 Barbadian students in 1997. By 2007, there were approximately 6,718, and by July 2013, roughly 7,200. This rising number, the then minister argued, translated into increased contributions payable by the government of Barbados. He further stated that in 1999, the government had paid $51 million in tuition fees, $79.3 million in 2007, and by 2008, $120.5 million. In summing up, the former minister stated that since 2006, government's total contributions to the University of the West Indies had surpassed the combined payments for nursery, primary and secondary education, as well as the Barbados Community College and the then-named Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic. Further arguing that government's perspective, he told this House that they cannot continue to preside over a situation where the growth and development of the non-university component of the educational system is severely retarded. The country needs to be able to build at its capacity at all levels. The minister then proceeded to announce, as a measure to respond to the scenario that he had just described, that with effect from 2014, Barbadian students at the University of the West Indies would be required to meet the cost of their tuition themselves directly from the 2014-2015 academic year onwards, while government would continue to pay the economic costs. In anticipation of the effect of this historical change in Barbados's educational policy, the minister informed the House that the government would create a means testing mechanism to address the circumstances of certain income groups, and that they would also adjust conditions for access to loans and repayment terms under the Student Revolving Loan Fund. That response measure, Mr. Speaker, is not the response that this government now in office will support, as we stated all along while in opposition. We understand that the government at the time had to take steps to deal with the drastic debt that confronted and still confronts this country. We understand that the rising tuition subsidy was pressuring an increasingly small public purse. However, to then place further pressure on students, parents, and guardians of students who would have to meet those costs is not a response that we consider from a social or economic perspective to be justified or appropriate. Sir, when citizens already have little in their pockets, when the economy is already depressed, and consumers are not spending because they do not have the wherewithal or are fearful of future austerities, when you accept that capacity must be built at all levels, then this government cannot agree to withdraw the tuition subsidy from Barbadian students at our university. Mr. Speaker, let me speak to the effect of the measures announced on the 13th of July of 2013. The drastic decline in Barbadian student intake at the University of the West Indies as a consequence of the decision of the previous administration was witnessed as we all expected. At the beginning of September 2014, the registrar at the Cave Hill campus had observed at the time that 1,468 Barbadians had registered by the start of the academic year, as opposed to the 2,240 that had been recorded in the 2013 academic year. A 45% drop in graduate students was also noted with 477 in 2014, as opposed to 875 in 2013. The impact, sir, on working mothers, an important strategic group in the socio-economic advancement of women and girls, has been the worst affected student category, according to a survey done by the Cave Hill campus 2 years after the decision of the former government was announced. Working mothers in their middle to late 30s, according to that study, was the biggest casualty. The principal of the Cave Hill campus, Professor Udine Barato, told us in April of this year that the Faculty of Social Sciences saw the average age of the student drop from 37 to 27. She informed that normally this more mature student would be one who does not yet have a degree, but may be seeking one to advance in their career or support their families better. And in most cases, these are single women. You may recall here, Mr. Speaker, that in April of 2015, Professor Sir Hilary Beckles had described the then government's decision as having set the Cave Hill campus back 20 years and of being nothing short and on an assault on working class women. Mr. Speaker, we must also bear in mind that at the Cave Hill campus, 72% of the undergraduate students and 70% of the postgraduate students are from Barbados. Women make up 67% of the student population. Approximately 57% of the students at Cave Hill require loans for tuition, textbooks, or other services related to their studies. And while I have made reference mostly to this campus, we also have to remember that the drop in intake of Barbadian students was registered across all campuses. The Ministry of Education had introduced a higher education support grant with effect from September of 2015 to cushion the impact of this measure. This support was disbursed with certain conditions attached relating to income, academic performance, and area of study. The sum of $15 million was provided to be disbursed over 3 academic years. Despite these mechanisms, sir, the decision of the previous government has had a deleterious effect. Our concern about the declining student enrollment was consistently stated while we were in opposition. We noted that the Barbados student intake at the Cave Hill campus had dropped by as much as 40% in the first year after government had imposed tuition fees on citizens. Less than 1,100 Barbadians were able to register for courses for the semester beginning September 2016, despite 2,500 having been accepted, and despite the government having said in the budgetary proposals announced in June of 2015 that bursaries and $5 million in scholarships would have been made available to assist Barbadian students with tuition fees. When we visited, sir, communities and talked to people, constituents would lament this decision of the former government. Many Barbadians felt that the norms of the social contract had been ignored when the tuition payment was suspended. Mr. Speaker, it is not simply a case of reduced intake. Some students that mustered the money to pay a semester's tuition were then challenged to pay the following semester and found themselves barred from taking examinations until they could pay, even though they may have been allowed to still attend classes. Students pursuing online e-learning programs had been similarly frustrated, and the experiences of many families have been painful, as parents have had to choose which child they would finance to have a university education, or the parent has had to choose whether she or he would continue with his or her own university education or curtail it so that the child or one of the children can go to university. And while our primary concern, Mr. Speaker, is the student, it should also be noted that some lecturers, full-time and part-time, have effectively found themselves without a job because of the lower Barbadian intake. Let me make it clear, sir, that this government is mindful of Barbados' severe indebtedness, and that government has to control expenditure. However, cuts and austerities cannot be indiscriminate. They have to be done within a framework that respects our long-standing commitment to human development, that appreciates the current social and economic circumstances of our citizens, and that is consistent with our goals to stimulate the economy and to promote growth. We regard the restoration of the service by government to pay the tuition fees for our students at the University of the West Indies as one of the critical measures that needs to be adopted to halt social decline, to alleviate suffering, and to build the foundation for new national growth. A stagnant economy cannot be revitalized without a trained, empowered, equipped workforce, nor can it be revitalized with heavily indebted consumers. Not only do we wish to see a graduate in every household, Mr. Speaker, in Barbados yet again, but we intend to see an entrepreneur in every household in Barbados. And now that the University of the West Indies has managed at the Cave Hill campus and other campuses to offer the region a range of programs in entrepreneurship, in business, in management, leadership, and so on, this is not the time to complicate access to the University of the West Indies, but indeed to facilitate it. Therefore, with effect from September 2018, as part of this government's mission critical agenda number 2 and number 14, we will resume payments of tuition fees for our citizens who are accepted to study at the University of the West Indies. And to clear up any doubts, I will state the concrete arrangements as follows. The government of Barbados will pay directly to the University of the West Indies tuition fees for Barbadians enrolled in undergraduate courses of study. Government, however, will only cover the tuition fees for a second undergraduate degree if Barbadian students gain at least upper second class honors, or if the second undergraduate degree will be of significant relevance to national development. As happened previously, we will pay tuition fees for Barbadian students pursuing a legal educational certificate granted by the Council of Legal Education of the Commonwealth Caribbean. Government will also pay the tuition fees for Barbadians pursuing postgraduate studies if they gained at least upper second class honors in the first degree, or if the postgraduate studies will be of significant relevance to national development. We have committed to providing a full list of the national development programs which will be considered for the 2018 to 2019 academic year, and we will make these known by the 3rd of August of 2018. We will also reach out, Mr. Speaker, to Barbadian students who have dropped out and encourage them to resume their tertiary studies. The government will allow an additional year beyond the normal period of the course of study in consideration of unforeseen circumstances that may force students to repeat a year. In other words, if you are pursuing full-time studies, government will cover tuition fees for 3 years plus 1, which is therefore 4 years. And for part-time studies, 4 years plus 1, which is 5 years. There will be safeguards against an explosion of enrollment, and as the Prime Minister has also noted in the presentation of budgetary measures on the 11th of June of this year, Barbadian students must give back in recognition of these services provided by the state. Full-time students will be required to give back by providing 150 hours of approved community service per year, whereas part-time students will be required to give back 100 hours of approved community service per year. A cabinet subcommittee comprising the Minister of Home Affairs, the Minister of Youth and Community Empowerment, the Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, and myself as Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, will propose a regime of these actions of volunteerism that will be agreed upon in consultation with the social partners and the general public. The modalities will be made known before September 2018. The administrative arrangements will proceed in similar fashion to what obtained before. My ministry will pay the UE tuition fees upon presentation of a requisition from the campuses with the list of enrolled Barbadians. Any eligible students who may have already gone ahead and paid any portion of their tuition fees will be reimbursed directly by the ministry. In the past, while there may be policies or intention for safeguards to accompany tuition support, they may not have been enforced at all or may have been inconsistent. We will nevertheless, through the condition that I have just explained, seek to streamline arrangements with the application of clear guidelines based on values of equity and service. I will also take this opportunity to say to you, Mr. Speaker, that this government is sensitive to the current and recent lobby to bring Barbadians enrolled in undergraduate degree programs at the Barbados Community College and Urdeston Teachers College in line with their fellow Barbadians at the University of the West Indies as far as tuition payment is concerned. We consider that there is a strong justification for a consistent tuition support policy in tertiary education and training. Indeed, it is only logical and fair. The government of Barbados remains committed to its vision of having a graduate in every household. And it is on this basis that this government holds the position that the said provision offered to Barbadian students at the University of the West Indies should also be offered to other Barbadian tertiary students undertaking undergraduate programs at both the Barbados Community College and the Urdeston Training College with immediate effect. However, we must bear in mind the current state of our economy and the reduced scope that government has for spending. And therefore, all fees paid by Barbadians for the 2018-2019 academic year at either of these institutions will be credited in full during the course of the upcoming academic year, 2018-2019. Equally, Mr. Speaker, both full-time and part-time students at both the Barbados Community College and the Urdeston Teachers Training College will also be required to give back in recognition of these services provided by the state. The measures that I have outlined for tuition support for Barbadian students at the University of the West Indies or pursuing the legal certificate must be seen in the context of our decision to at least restore provision and arrangements that were in existence prior to 2014. Mr. Speaker, we have a plan to deal with the national debt. We explained it in our Mission Critical Agenda number 2, and that plan includes the reprofiling of the debt, a step which will allow the government the much-needed space to meet certain commitments that are required to put the social and economic agenda of this country back on track. The savings that will be achieved from the reprofiling and from other funds and savings will be used towards paying our students' tuition fees at the University of the West Indies, as well as other services on our Mission Critical Agenda. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have already declared that at the core of our development model will be our commitment to and reform of Barbados' system of education and training. We are committed to setting Barbados on a new development trajectory, where every Barbadian matters and in which every Barbadian will be given the chance to be the best that they can be and to prepare them to be global citizens. Mr. Speaker, we intend to lead in education and with education. Mr. Speaker, I thank you. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the sitting be suspended until 2:30 this afternoon.
Question is this sitting be postponed, suspended until 2:30 in the afternoon. All honourable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This sitting is thereby suspended.